So, good day. I hope everyone's doing super well. Today, we're going to be talking about Jenny Odell's book, How to Do Nothing. This book came out of a series of classes that this writer and artist, who lives out in California, gave to her students when her students began coming to her and said, "Miss, I'm so distracted and I feel like I can't pay attention to anything all the time. And I'm also very anxious, even though I'm in college and I'm a student and I ostensibly have all these advantages." So Odell started thinking about the state of mind that her students were in, and she wrote this book as a response. So first she starts with the idea that her students were coming to her and saying, if I'm not being productive, who am I? What am I? I don't feel as though I am of any value. So, and also all my time feels quantified. Like whenever I'm not doing something productive, I start to feel anxious. Like, what am I doing? Where am I supposed to be going? And so she started thinking, well, what happens when we have nothing to do? When all we do is sit around and juggle limes, right? Or when we're just hanging around stuck in our little apartments, feeling restless and bored and anxious. How can we learn how to do nothing, right? This was her principle of investigation. So she goes on to say, life can feel very complex, that there can be all these demands on our attention, as I said before, that it's difficult to find time to develop thoughts, to have actual conversations with our friends and to connect to our families. So when our communication becomes cut short and our time becomes monetized, right, there are fewer opportunities to really find one another and to connect to each other, especially when we're locked into these kind of quarantine spaces where you feel like you're going to go crazy, right? Furthermore, Odell points out that many of her students felt like their time was being hijacked, that it was being kind of captured, right? And that they didn't have control over it. And so that their desire for connection was actually being used against them in an evil way by companies seeking to profit off of our natural interest in one another and our desire to reach out to one another. So Odell developed a kind of action plan for how to do nothing, as she calls it. So the first part that she describes as kind of dropping out. So that is to say, exercising control over what you do or don't want to pay attention to. Maybe you don't want to pay attention to me. Maybe you're just completely done with this class and you're going to just turn me off right now. Bye, Professor Miles. But the important point here is that she wants us to be able to control what we have, what we pay attention to. And then she also wants us to think in terms of moving laterally, she says, which is to branch out like the roots of a tree and connect to the people and the place that is right around us, right? Her third element of her action plan is this notion drawn from the philosophy of ecology, which is called bioregionalism, right? Where you learn all the interesting details of what makes the island of Montreal this like rich and distinctive place. And she goes on to say, when we think in terms of doing nothing, right? We don't want to be just sitting around on the couch distracting ourselves, right? We want to have some sort of way of really pushing aside the anxieties and fears, right, that tell us what we should or should not be doing and engaging with the moment in a different sort of way, right? So to question, first of all, why is it that we feel more satisfied when we're being productive? And by productive, I mean making things or doing an assigned task, right? So to question that. The second thing that she says is, it's not important to be anti-technology, right, when you're doing nothing. This is actually a form of technology that's connecting us and bringing us together right now, hopefully. But some forms of technology can be used as a tool of distraction, right? And to remember that there are massive companies right now who are engaged in the process of buying and selling our attention. Right in this very moment, in a kind of quarantine pandemic. There are companies out there scheming about how to buy and sell our attention, and that keeping us in a state of anxiety, of envy, loneliness, and distraction is actually sometimes kind of profitable for certain types of platforms, right? So Odell asks us to feel the weirdness of doing nothing, to feel the difficulty of it, that when we become not part of an economic system, we no longer become homo economicus because our value isn't determined by our productivity or our personal brand, right? Or the strength and significance of our career, or how entrepreneurial we are. And that all of these things we've taken for granted as measurements of value. So what happens when we don't have those things, when we don't become valued for those things? Who knows, right? We need to investigate that.